You're tuned into the hottest paranormal life show on YouTube, Into the Fringe, where we discuss lost civilizations, UFOs, cryptids, unsolved mysteries, megalithic structures, extraterrestrials, interdimensional portals, time skips, and more. Don't change that channel, because now you are leaving the mainstream and entering into the fringe.
Greetings, followers. It is I, Cardinal Sin, and today it is my honor to be joined by Albert Rosales, and I will read his introduction. Born in Cuba, Albert Rosales migrated to the U.S. in 1966. He had several unusual incidents as a young man while living in Cuba, and such incidents continued as an adult in the U.S. Rosales became interested in unusual phenomena and UFOs at a young age, but soon directed his focus to the crux of the phenomena, the humanoids, entities, extraterrestrials, Ufonauts, etc. He began collecting data on such encounters from worldwide sources in the late 80s. He has a current database of over 20,000 entries, which is updated and corrected daily, and he has published 16 books to date. Welcome, Albert Rosales, to Into the Fringe.
Hi, thanks for having me again. It's an honor to be with you, and I'm really ready to go talk about the humanoids.
Absolutely.
What I call the others among us. They've been with us for a long time.
It's my pleasure to have you on. And Mr. M.H. says, Cardinal Sin, can I just say that Albert Rosales is a legend, and his books are amazing. So much hard work and research put into them.
Thank you, sir.
And I'm going to ask the chat if anybody is hearing an echo, because I am, and that might even be my fault. Let's see. Alright, let's see if that makes a difference. Still hearing an echo. What do the folks in the chat say? There's an echo. Albert, by any chance, do you have a YouTube window and a StreamYard window open at the same time?
No, I only have the StreamYard open.
Yeah, I wonder why there is an echo.
Make sure, but I only have the StreamYard.
And T Derivative Jill is here. Thanks for being here. Do you have headphones or earbuds that you can wear and turn off your speakers? That usually creates an echo.
I don't have earbuds with me. I used to have a pair, but I couldn't find them today. I was looking for them. I couldn't find them.
Or an earplug. Or some headphones like I'm wearing.
No.
Turn your speakers down as much as you can and still be able to hear me.
Okay.
Your mic is picking up your speakers, I think.
Okay, let me see. I say something?
Check 1, 2.
Okay, I hear you.
Okay. We still have a little bit of an echo, but
it's
that
better
may
now.
not be able to be helped.
Well, next time I'll make sure I have some earbuds for. Okay.
And low spec Linux laptop says only Cardinal echo, Albert no echo. Yes, that means that when I'm talking on his end, it's echoing because it's getting picked up from his speakers by his mic and then comes back.
Okay, I'm on a laptop.
No, we don't have YouTube playing in the background. So let's go ahead and get started. We are dealing with the Roaring Twenties today, and we are going to be discussing cases from 1920 to 1929, and I'll go ahead and take the first one here, and this is in Quebec, Canada, in 1920, nighttime. A man was returning home one night when his horse began acting strangely. Then he spotted a circular UFO resting on the ground nearby. He said it was about 50 feet in diameter and 16 feet high with a yellow light. The witness reported observing 4 or 5 small humanoid figures moving quickly around the outside of the object and said he heard childlike sounds coming from them. He then saw the UFO take off with a machine-like noise and what sounded like a rush of air.
This type of case, you would think it happened in the 70s or 80s, and it's a documented case from 1920, which is in Philip Rife in his book that it did not start at Roswell, which he documented a lot of cases from before 1947. It didn't give a specific location in Quebec, but it's interesting that obviously this man was interviewed years after the fact, but it sounds so much like many other cases that we hear about now in the modern era. A landed UFO with small entities, and the childlike sound is interesting because I have documented a lot of cases like that maybe they're saying something that sounds to us like children speaking, playing around. It's an interesting case.
And I'll let you take the next one.
The next one is really strange. Although there's no UFO directly involved, the incident reminds me of the modern day 4011 strange disappearances and stuff like that. This is from Chile, a place called Quemchi, in the island of Chilo. That area has been is really a hotbed for strange incidents and UFO incidents. But this happened back in 1920. Also, in a late evening, the two sons of the Munoz family, 12 and 13 years old respectively, had gone fishing in a small boat on a canal nearby, the Cauquaje Canal, near their home. The fish was biting, and it was getting late, and it became night. Their worried parents noticed that they haven't returned yet from their fishing expedition. Concerned, the parents, accompanied by several neighbors, went out searching for the boys in their boats. They had their boats also. At first, they could not find them anywhere until they thought of going further out to sea, where the Gulf waters met the canal. There, on a small beach, they found the overturned boat of the boys, and the 12-year-old son apparently unharmed. He was there. However, the 13-year-old was nowhere in sight. When asked what had occurred to his brother, the 12-year-old boy could only say that they suddenly felt a very strong wind dragging them out to sea, and they saw what appeared to be a water spout twisting about 100 meters above the waters. The water suddenly turned white, and that was his last memory. That's all he could remember. Later, he found himself floating next to his upturned boat, his brother nowhere in sight. Everyone was stunned, and there hadn't been no reports of inclement weather during the time. The oldest brother, Nano, remained missing. That was his name. They searched for him, of course, for a week, and after a while they assumed he was dead, drowned. According to local tradition, a wake was held for him. However, 4 years later, one afternoon, Nano Munoz suddenly appeared at the front door of the house. He was wearing the same clothing he had left with the same day he had gone fishing with his brother. The stunned parents could not believe what happened and attempted to ask Nano what had occurred and where he had been for the past 4 years. However, they were horrified to learn that now Nano was completely deaf-mute, and since he had never learned how to write, he was never able to explain what had occurred to him. So now he was deaf-mute and no one knew what happened to him, and sadly he wasn't able to tell anybody what really happened. After 4 years, he was found, the same clothing. This is like a Rip Van Winkle type of tale. That you're gone and all of a sudden for 4 years and then you appear again. Maybe for you it only a couple hours has gone by, but in this case they will never know because he couldn't speak at all after the incident. Reminds me also of incidents which fairies abduct humans and they're gone for maybe a day, and then when they come back they realize they've really been gone for 20 years or more.
Yeah, that's definitely analogous to what happens in fairy lore.
Right.
I'm going to go ahead and let you take the cases because if I mute my mic, there's no echo, if you don't mind.
Okay. Sure. Any comments or about that case? Well, yeah,
just that
you're
sounds
right.
really scary.
Well, the next one we go on still in the year 1920, September. This is here in the United States near a place called Bethel, North Carolina. On an afternoon, this is from the old UFO Roundup and Filer's Files. There was a cotton harvest at the time, and a 14-year-old laborer or worker. The name they gave was Nicora B. And her family were out in the fields picking the white balls from the cotton plants and stuffing them in their trailing tote sacks when they saw something large flying over the farm. They describe it as an object resembling two pie pans placed together, lip to lip. Typical flying saucer. The silvery object zigzagged across the sky and came to rest in the field in front of the witnesses. Okay, landed, and according to them, two little bald, no hair like me, white man got out and pointed a short stick-like implement at them. They pointed something at them. These entities or humanoids, they were the size of little boys, but their faces seemed older. Again, this goes back to fairy lore, where some of the fairies they look young, but you look at their faces and they're older. One of the little bald men began digging and poking in the dirt, and something that looked like a shovel, and put some dirt into a bag. He then took a small plant and placed it in the bag also. Both little men then backed up, one after the other, and entered the pie pan shaped object, still pointing the sticks at them as they walked backwards into the object. And then moments later, the UFO took off in a zigzag maneuver and disappeared in the direction it came. We must wonder what those stick-like implements were. Maybe they were some kind of weapons. Who knows? I mean, the witness did not report any ill effects or any injuries, but maybe they would have tried something. Something could have happened to them. This is September 1920 in Bethel, North Carolina. Now we're going to move on for the next case. This is in Russia. back then, and Russia was a hotbed of strange incidents. Many of them UFO-like and related to maybe extraterrestrials. This is in a little village called Pechenija in the West Yaroslavl province, Yaroslavl in Russia. This is either occurred in 1921 or 1922. They're not too sure. The time was unknown. It's a local villager nicknamed Pechnonji. He had been sensing or hearing strange vibrations on the ground on a regular basis where he lived. It was coming from under his wooden cabin. These usually began suddenly and at the same time. In one occasion, several small-sized entities entered the house. These entities, according to the witness, had gray-greenish faces, large slanted dark eyes, and this is an interesting detail, and hoofed legs, like hooves. The strange visitors told him, in a bad accented Russian, "Leave this place, you cannot stay here. There's too much traffic." I had no idea what they meant by that. The source does not know either. And it cannot be changed. After that, his cattle began dying and his wife became sick also. In a short period of time, he left the area. He had to clear the cabin. This is from the researcher Valery Kukuchkin from the Yaroslavl UFO group and Anton Alfalov. Now, we can wonder what did they mean by this place was a lot of traffic. Do they mean some kind of energy lines like ley lines or who knows? But apparently the guy he wasn't supposed to be there, and he paid the price. And he left. This. Very, very weird case because the entities were described as gray-greenish faces, slanted dark eyes, very similar to some of the modern-day aliens, except for the hoof legs, that's really weird. Even though it's not the first, incident which I read or hear about entities with hoof legs.
That is really weird.
Yeah. We're gonna move on to an abduction. One of the first recorded abductions in Europe. This is Marseille, in Bouches-du-Rhône, France, the region of Bouches-du-Rhône. I hope I'm not killing the French, but this is 1921, the summer. One afternoon, a very hot year, according to the report. The witness was playing. One day, I'm on the hills of the North Canal. There was a canal there. He was 8 years old, and he loved to lose himself in the moonlight landscape made by excavation from the First World War. I guess there must have been a lot of damage there. When he was playing there, suddenly two beings or entities wearing a sort of pliable helmet literally leaped out from between some acacia trees. They leaped at him, and without preliminaries, they dragged him toward what he thought was a oddly shaped tank. He thought it was a water tank. Well, it looked to him like a water tank. They took him up into the machine without being able to resist. He said that without him being able to want to resist, he suddenly began to cry, and I don't know. He doesn't know whether that moved him, but after a while an opening appeared in the ceiling of the cabin, and in a few seconds he found himself on the ground again. However, he had to walk most of the afternoon until he found himself near the road. He had left only 5 minutes before. When he got home at night, his parents treated him like a liar, and no one believed him because no one back then could understand what could have happened to him. He couldn't add much detail to what the machine looked like or the cabin. He only remembers the two basic details. There were square, at least rectangular portholes around this tank or whatever it was, and the cabin had a sort of couch that he sat on. He seemed to recall that their helmets, the entities, appeared metallic. He doesn't recall any anatomical details or what the body looked like, except that the two beings were very tall and very slender. He never described the faces, but for some reason these two beings took the witness, the young witness, 8 years old, into the object, into the UFO. Of course, he didn't call it a UFO back then. And thankfully, they let him go. Like he said, he started crying, and maybe they felt sorry for him, and they let him go. So this, an abduction. Even though he recalled the whole incident, but it's, this is one of the early abduction reports that we have. This is from French researcher Joel Mesnard and Jean-Marie Bigorne. Okay, now next we have a what I call a typical close encounter. I don't think none of them are typical, but this is maybe run of the mill. This is from Detroit, Michigan, summer of 1922, around 10 p.m. at night. The witness, a Mrs. Irma Hintz, Hinz, her name is recorded in the report, was walking home from a movie with a young friend when the two teenagers, she was a teenager at that time, so they saw what it looked like a large disc-shaped object hovering over a vacant lot on Dragoon Avenue, I guess in Detroit. The sky suddenly lit up, and the object descended to the height of a large tree and slowly revolved as it hovered. Around the perimeter of the bottom of the object, or the craft, were they could see rectangular windows lit from within. And seated at these windows were approximately 20 entities, or humanoids, that were seen only from the shoulders, the neck up. They were, according to the witnesses, these entities were bald-headed, with eyes set close together. They were staring intently at the young couple. No other features were observed. They only saw the eyes and from here up. According to Mrs. Hintz Miss Hintz and her date watched for several minutes, but left quickly when they became frightened. Although Miss Hintz told her parents at the time, her mother tended to believe that it was a vision of some kind. She recalls that her date, the young man that was with her, his name was William O'Brien. He was never interviewed. She was interviewed by researchers Ron Westrom and Ted Blocher. They were big researchers and specifically dealing with humanoids encounters and stuff like that. That's your typical C3 case, hovering UFO with entities inside.
The really interesting thing about this is people think that the modern UFO era started in 1947, but it didn't.
No, they've been with us forever. Before 1947, there were cases. Many of them were like, many people didn't report them because fear of ridicule, or maybe they didn't know who to report them to. But they were there. They were all over the world, U.S., Europe, many places. Now, if you want me to move on to the next one, this is still 1922, and this is from Europe again. Another location which it's always been a hotbed of incidents, close encounters, cases. Poland, a place called Targowick in Warsaw. This occurred June or July, the witness states, 1922, one afternoon. This is from Polish researcher Bronislaw Rysepike and Krzysztof Piechota in their book UFOs Over Poland, 1996. The main witness was taking a stroll with his brother-in-law, and an aunt. When they saw something descending from the sky, at the same time it was emitting whatever it was. It emitted a whistling sound. The startled witnesses were sure it was going to crash, but somehow the object managed to stop in midair at about 6.5 feet to 10 feet above the ground. The object resembled an enormous, slightly flattened sphere, like a sphere, a little bit flattened, something like two plates connected together by their upper rims. Again, a saucer shape. It looked like it was made of aluminum, kind of silvery, but also somewhat gray metallic in color. The witnesses stood at about 330 to 500 feet away from the object. The main witness noticed that both sections of the saucer were separated by a sort of a rotating ring in the center. The other parts of the craft remained motionless. Soon the rotating section stopped, and he saw something resembling a frame, probably a section of the craft window, or a window or porthole. He got the impression that the crew of the object was observing the group, observing them. The witness was convinced that the craft was going to land and they would be invited on board. But suddenly, moments later, the craft shot up at an angle, about 45-degree angle, and followed by a loud blast, and it vanished into the distance. Technically, they didn't see any entities or humanoids, but he felt sure that they were being observed by somebody or something inside the object from the window.
So this was definitely a UFO case, but not necessarily a humanoid case.
It implied that there was somebody looking at them. They didn't really actually see them, but yeah.
And we have a question in the chat about what a humanoid is. Whack Cackle asks, are these beings still humanoid if the head isn't human-like and the legs or bottom half is obscured? And went on to say, the head, neck, and shoulders were frog-like, 2 arms ending in 3 fingers and 1 thumb. I didn't see anything below the waist as it was outside the window. And I said it sounded like a humanoid to me. What do you think, Albert?
Hey, as long as they have a head, torso, arms and legs, they're human-like. Not exactly like a human, but they're humanoid. Those entities that he described sound like definitely humanoids, maybe reptilian type.
And Whack Cackle also asks, does interdimensional count?
That's one of my theories. A lot of these entities, I think, visit us or show up here through travel in between dimensions or realms. You know, maybe some of them use intergalactic travel, but some of these entities they come from other dimensions. That's one of my theories.
Yeah, I agree. I think they can be both extraterrestrial and interdimensional.
Yes.
And if they are bound by the physics that we know, and they don't understand physics way beyond our understanding, they could simply be going through dimensions and coming here through a dimensional portal, let's say.
Openings through a dimension from one dimension to the other. That's why I think a lot of the missing people or the never found, maybe they somehow were able to go into another dimension and were not able to return.
That's definitely one of the leading theories for the missing 411 cases.
Yeah. Well, you want me to continue on for the next one? Okay. This one is June 1923. It's near a town called Mount Erie, Illinois. Afternoon. The 10-year-old witness name was Norman Massey. Massei. I'm sorry, IE. He went out to take his horses into a pasture. I guess the area was pretty rural. And as he led his horses through the gate, he noticed an object with lights all around it nearby. He walked to within 50 feet of the object and noticed 5 men on board the craft. He described the men as they were short, about 4 feet tall, with blonde hair. I mean, they were short, but they had blonde hair, similar to maybe elves or fairies. As he got closer, he could hear them talking. One of the men sat on a chair, and the other called him the commander. I guess these entities were speaking in English. I guess they speak the language of the location they're at. I would imagine. The other men made trips back and forth into the object, and Massey then overheard one of the men tell the commander that their repairs had been made. The object was described as metallic and standing on 3 legs. It had a dome on top with holes in it. The top of the object resembled melted glass. And the object then rose up and hovered, and the tripod legs telescoped up into the belly of the craft, which then the craft then went straight up and then shot away towards the west at high speed. I mean, we have a lot of cases in which people see entities or aliens or whoever they might be that appear to be repairing their craft.
A lot of early reports had reports of men or humanoids with their craft on the ground, either taking soil samples or water samples or trying to repair their craft.
Also, we have to say if these craft came from a planet lights years away, I mean, I guess they're not completely, I mean, I don't know, because I believe that there's some of them have crashed, like the one in Roswell and other places. So who knows? And the witness here clearly overheard the man say that they had repaired the craft. This is from reporter Len Wells and Evansville.
Before you jump into that one, I wanted to mention that somebody said that they noticed that your books are available in Amazon again. They're back in stock. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, they're finally back in stock. I don't know if all of them are yet, but they were recently. My new publisher was able to republish the books in both Kindle and the second edition.
Congratulations! That's awesome.
Thank you. I need to publish new books with new cases, and I'm working on that soon. It took us a while to republish the old books, so I'll get into that later. To get because I have from those books I have thousands more cases now, and I couldn't include all the cases in the books. We were just too many. So
I can't wait for the next one. It'll be up until 2020, correct?
Yeah, I'm going to add some 2021 cases too. I found some interesting cases.
Wow, that's
2021.
I'm really jazzed about that.
All right. All right, let's go. Let's move on here. This case is from famous researcher Raymond Fowler, who wrote the Andreasson Affair books. At least 5 or 6 books or more. He's been around for a while, a long time, and the guy is an excellent researcher. He also experienced himself several incidents, and a lot of his family members also.
We had Christopher O'Brien on the show, and his third appearance was going to be with Raymond Fowler, but for some reason they couldn't make it.
Well, Raymond's way up there in years now.
Yeah, he's been around a long time.
He's been around for a while. This incident, according to Raymond, occurred. It happened to his father, who was a Navy man, just like I was. This happened at Otter Cliffs in Mount Desert Island, Maine. That's isolated there. Back in the autumn of 1923, about 11 p.m. at night. He was alone there, what they call an U.S. Navy compass station. The radio operator on duty was monitoring a violent electrical storm when a lightning bolt hit the cable outside the building. I guess the radio operator here was Raymond's father. Okay, the bolt went through the transmission key and landed inside the man's abdomen. Then a fiery light seemed to shine from the witness's stomach, and then a soft light went through the station roof, which then formed a field of light that surrounded the now paralyzed witness. He was now paralyzed, and extended into a 7-foot radius around the light inside the room. Suddenly, there were 3 flashes of light, and what he called 3 majestic-looking men appeared, standing in front of the witness. After the flash, these men, according to the witness, they were wearing shining robes and were smiling. Each bowed at the witness without speaking. They bowed, and the 3 men described as having very fine features with light cream texture complexions and extremely bright eyes. They wore soft doe-skin form-fitting boots, I guess like leather boots. The being on the left of the witness pointed his finger at the fiery ball of light on the witness' abdomen. I guess he still had the light in his abdomen. And in a flash of light, he leaped into the being's hand and then tossed it. He tossed it to the other being next to him. This is wild. Where then that other being then tossed it to the third being, who threw it into a copper mesh screening of the station. At that point, the fiery ball went up in a shower of sparks and disappeared. At this point, all 3 men then smiled, bowed again, and disappeared in 3 flashes of light.
Wow.
They never spoke or said anything, and why they appear after a lightning strike, I don't know. Maybe they were elementals or some kind of nature entities. Who knows? But it's kind of
Mr. MH has a question.
Okay.
Is there an approximate release date for the next and last book?
It's going to have to be early next year, because I got a lot of stuff to finish, and I'm working on the new cases also. So hopefully early next year, or
You're still compiling the cases?
yeah, I'm still compiling cases, and it's like a never ends. It's always every day I find new cases.
But this is definitely going to be your last book, and you're going to retire, right?
Yeah, retire for a second time. Yeah, after 21, I don't think I'm done. Yeah, I'm done. It's a very interesting case here. Now, the next case is interesting because it occurred during a famous earthquake in Japan. And there's an exact date available. It happened in Yokohama and Kanagawa Prefecture in Japan on September 1st, 1923, around 11:58 a.m. That's when the famous earthquake occurred there. And it was during the terrible, what they call the Kanto earthquake. The main witness, Mr. K, who was running a printing shop, safely escaped from the building, which was crushed, and with his son left the scene to help neighbors. Okay, he ran to a safe place with the others, and there they saw a disc-shaped object. An object, that descended close to Mr. K and the other 7 people with him. Okay, the craft was basically egg-shaped with a rim in the middle, and he had a transparent dome on top. Okay, the bottom was metallic in color. There was no visible landing gear. The group followed the hovering disc for about an hour to a bamboo grove without any problems. They followed the disc. They must have been leading them out of danger. The disc had descended very low to the ground and seemingly led the group away from danger, like I just said. Mr. K, excuse me, he thanked the disc, and then two people appeared from inside. And the one on the right stepped out and shook hands with Mr. K. The disc rose up at high speed and faded into the clouds. Now, Mr. K and the others described the occupants of the disc as Caucasian men. That's interesting. Wearing blue coveralls with a white belt tightened around the waist. Their faces were white, the nose high, the mouth a bit sharp. I don't know what they mean by that. Maybe slit. And they wore something like a white helmet which covered their ears and hair.
Now, when UFOnauts make actual physical contact with a witness, that becomes a CE4K case, correct?
When when they exit the UFO and they contact the witness, we have several close encounters of the third kind entities. We have type A, where the entities are seen on board or on the object. Type B, when they are seen stepping out of the object and stepping back inside. This could be considered a type B, even though they contacted the witness. It wasn't really a contact, but well, it is. It was. It wasn't an abduction.
With shaking the hands of the witness, that becomes CEK4, does it not?
Well, yeah, you could say that because it was, personal,
physical contact.
Yeah. And then we have type C, which is, there's an object seen on a field or somewhere, and entities are seen around it or nearby, but they're not seen going inside the object. Of course, then we have after that we have type D, in which very similar to type E, in which a lone occupant or a lone humanoid is seen in an area where UFOs have been seen or spotted. And type E is most common nowadays, in which a humanoid or entity, a cryptid, is seen by witnesses, but there's no object or UFO reported. And then, of course, we got type G, which is an abduction. I also include type H, which is a supposedly crashed UFO or a recovery of a alien body or a humanoid's body. There's type I, which means there have been an injury to the witness. Those two last, I made those up. It's included in my catalog. But this is interesting because this earthquake was huge and it killed a lot of people. This is by Japanese researcher Masaki Takasaka. And we don't hear too many cases from Japan, but there's been a lot of there. And I was lucky to find this case. There's a lot of Japanese books on UFOs, but they never see the light of day over here. Like a lot of UFO books from Eastern Europe, Russia, Poland. There's a lot of cases from there. Romania, Hungary. Lots of cases. Okay, the next case is from Florida, where I am, and it's really a weird one. This case was published or investigated by the late Timothy Green Beckley. He interviewed the witness back in 1981. Him and researcher Stephen Putnam. Well, according to the report, this is in Dade City, Florida. It's nearby, is in Central Florida somewhere. 1924. This is during the daytime. The witness, a small girl at the time, was Evelyn Wendt, WENDT. She was playing in the schoolyard, according to her. And the first thing she remembers is that a neck-shaped thing was on the ground, like a craft. And there was bright light shining into her eyes. Then the light went out and a hatch opened on the craft. And what she called little people emerged, which she thought they were robots. They were smaller than her, and they resemble, according to her, animated flowers. Just picture a humanoid with a flower-like thing around it, and faces where the butt would be, like the face, and then like a flower. Strange. They were carrying a weapon of some sort, what she thought was a weapon, and they carried this weapon to the school, according to her, to the school science building. And she was told that they were going to stop the work that was being done in the science building. They said if the work continued, they will destroy the place. That's what they told her, or that's what she remembers. Later, she heard that the place was a shambles. I guess they did destroy the place. According to her, there seemed to be a man with the little people. Yeah, I guess he was the leader of the group. According the conversation wasn't real talking, but it was done telepathically. When they were going to leave, she asked them if she could go with them, but they said no. They promised to come back for her in 35 years, but it never happened. The saucer was lead, looking and very pockmarked. I guess he had holes. And when it started up, its molecule expanded and it turned silvery white. It went straight up and hovered and then disappeared. Not surprisingly, one's memory of this incident was not entirely clear after the 50 years that had passed since the day. So this could be confusing, the details. She recalled that there seemed to be a man with the little people, but not much else. There was some telepathic communication, and they invited the girl to go with them in their craft, but she said she didn't want to. They promised to come back in 35 years. But according to her, they never did come back.
I'm not sure why, but almost always the entities lie.
When they promise or they prophesy something, most of the time it doesn't happen. It's incorrect information. I don't know if that's to discredit the witness or, well, you're right, yeah. Very weird case. Let me take a little sip of coffee here. Now the next one is from Spain. Very interesting case. No UFO was seen per se, but a humanoid was seen. This is from researcher Iker Jimenez, citing encounters in the UFO encounters in the history of Spain. 1924. In the afternoon, the location was Cuero, a place called Cuero, in La Mancha province, Spain. The witness was standing near a local rural church when he saw what he described as a short humanoid figure, only about 1.20 meters in height, wearing a tight-fitting green-colored coverall. He had arms and legs in a rigid position and approached to within 2 meters of the witness. Got very close. The humanoid seemed to have both feet together and was resting on some type of circular platform that apparently propelled him above the ground. On his hands he carried an object or a control panel that seemed to operate the floating platform. Interesting. It reminds me of the security guards nowadays that go around the malls with those little like, what do you call those? They travel around in little like motorized chairs or whatever.
Little electric cars.
Yeah, but the ones that go standing up. The humanoid, we had human features, disappears silently into some distant fields. This is a famous case, one of the first ones recorded there in Spain. The witness kept it to himself for years after he spoke to the researchers about it. So it's a humanoid floating around in a metallic platform being controlled by some kind of a control panel. 1924. Interesting. Okay, let's move on. 1925. We're going to go now to South America. Brazil. A hotbed of incidents from the 1940s before through modern era. Always a lot of humanoid incidents there.
Brazil still has a lot of cases, both humanoid and UFO.
Yeah. This is 1925. Researcher Edison Boaventura Jr. He recorded a lot of incidents before 1947. The place is called Vila Belmiro and Santos, Brazil. Like I said, 1925, around 6 p.m., 1800 hours. Again, this is a young witness. 8-year-old Lucinda Alves was playing with some friends on Rua, Sao Paulo. Rua means street, and Sao Paulo street. It was the street in front of their house when they suddenly heard a strange buzzing sound. They looked around, they turned around, they saw a tall figure, a tall humanoid figure, wearing silvery clothing that covered him from head to toe, the whole body. The strange figure carried a metallic, luminous baton in one of his hands. Now, you recall the incident in North Carolina with they also carry sticks in their hands or a baton. As the figure approached the playing children, they ran away from the area. They didn't see the humanoid again. So again, this humanoid was carrying a baton or a luminous stick, or for what purpose, I don't know. But it seems like a lot of these humanoid encounters, they reported the entities carry something resembling a baton or a wand. Some people call that a wand or something. Maybe it's used for protection or something, I'm not sure. But there's many cases like that. It's going to get even stranger now. This is from the True Horror Stories of Texas website. I contacted a researcher there. This is from Texas, a little town called La Feria in Texas. And this is from the summer 1925 night. Now, this is totally different from any type of UFO encounter that I ever heard of. But I recorded it, so it'd be recorded. So we know what all the different types of incidents that we're dealing with, that have occurred. This happened one night after a rainy day. The streets were filled with puddles, and the night was calm. And there were 3 brothers, little boys, came out and played in the streets since it was during the summer vacation, so they were allowed to play late at night. So it was late. They were playing a game that involved running and playing with in the water puddles, of course. After several hours of playing, the brothers just sat down on the edge of the street, talking and laughing and telling jokes, since they got tired of running. Suddenly, all of a sudden, one of the boys spotted a moving creature at the other stretch end of the street, close to an underground sewer tunnel. He said to him, it looked like 5 small creatures. And the brothers decided to, in their words, to lynch the creatures, or maybe for some reason they wanted to kill the creature with rocks. But when they got close to the creatures, to their surprise, they were not rats, which they originally thought they were. Instead, they were small people, small humanoids, no more than 8 inches tall. Only 8 inches tall. I mean, this case is unique, but I heard other cases with humanoids reported that small. Malaysia and Colombia. To be exact, their sizes were the size of an elf in a shelf Christmas doll. They started to speak in an unknown language between them, according to the boys. Only one creature spoke their language, telling the brothers something. The boys wanted to join them in whatever game they were playing, but one of the creatures that spoke their language told the boys that they wanted to join, that they were not allowed to play with them since they lived underground. They were apparently not allowed to mix with humans, according to the little creature. That's what they told the boys. The creatures, they told the boys that they have been living underground for thousands of years, and once in a while, every hundreds of years, they will surface from underground to see how things were on the surface. Weird. After a while, the small creatures said goodbye and returned back to their underground world, never to be seen again. So these creatures technically were not extraterrestrials, but they were intraterrestrials. They were supposedly they came from a realm inside the earth.
This definitely reminds me of the fairy folklore.
Yes, yeah, because many of the fairies are supposedly lived inside mountains and mounds and hills. We'll see. Weird. Okay, we're going back to Chile again. A lot of weird stuff there. This is another case that deals with a strange disappearance in the same area. It's near Ancud, in the island of Chile, in Chile. This is 1926, one night. And according to the researchers, Rob McGregor and Trish Jenschutz, they wrote this incident up in Fate magazine back in 1984. The 18-year-old brother of Marcelino Saldivia, because Marcelino was the one that reported the report, was sleeping one night on the porch when he disappeared and was not found until Easter week of 1976. So he wasn't found until 50 years later. When Marcelino, his brother, he was feeling nostalgic about his lost brother, he went to visit their old home on the banks of the Rio Pudeto. There, seated in the living room and dressed as he had been half a century earlier, was his brother, which was now old and he evidently demented. When Marcelino asked where he had been all those years, the man replied that only that he has been on a boat. On a boat. Maybe, a UFO, an object, who knows. And implored his brother not to ask him anything more. Later, when a woman named Elena Vera Guerrero asked him about it, Marcelino shook his head and said, "They hear everything." So apparently somebody have abducted him and kept him for 50 years, returned him to the same location, and he didn't want to talk about it. Who or what, we don't know. But he said he was on a boat. Maybe that's the only thing he could relate it to. And then at the end, cryptically, he said, "They hear everything." Who's that? We don't know. Okay, we go to a 1926 case now in Australia. Australia has had many cases, especially before 1947, have been recorded many incidents. This is from the Blue Mountains UFO Research Club newsletter from January 2012 at a place called Mount Isa in Queensland, Australia. Vast area there. In 1926 at night, a small Aboriginal tribal group living there told others that they had been visited one night as everyone sat at the edge of a waterhole campfire talking. From what they told the other Aborigines of the region, a big black object came down from the sky, and apparently a large number of pygmy height beings, short beings, emerged and rounded up 20 or so of the tribespeople and their children, and herded them into the craft. Then the little beings, for some reason unknown, took away the children, but for some time, but later returned them. Took the children and brought them back. The craft apparently rose into the air and flew away somewhere beyond the clouds, according to the Aborigines. The details are hazy, but it appears that the craft returned its captives through the clouds early the next morning to a location a few miles from where they had been abducted. The side of the craft opened, and then, by now terrified, Aborigines ran out screaming. That's all that's known about that case, but apparently they were taken, but thankfully, again, they were returned by the humanoids. One next case is again from Poland. One of my favorite cases, investigated by Bronislaw Rezapecki and another researcher, Marcin Miodaszewski. I get cases from all over the world. A lot of them I have to translate. But anyway, this is from a place called Ujazd, Ujazd, Poland. September 1926, between 4 and 7 p.m. The witness, a girl named Sophia, was alone in a meadow, grazing three cows, when she suddenly turned around, and what she said, she described three great disc-shaped objects, only about 2 meters in diameter. They were hovering just above the ground, and three strange entities standing in front of the objects, in front of the UFOs. She said there was total silence in the area. That's another thing that's reported often, when silence suddenly overwhelms the area of the witness. All three objects had something resembling open doors. And according to the Sophia, the humanoids were less than 120, 130 centimeters tall, maybe about 80 centimeters. And they wore dark green suits and something like belts or ropes around their waist. She was unable to see any hair or facial features as the humanoids stood about 100 meters away from her. They were staring at her. Very scared, she began running away. And when she briefly turned around, everything was gone. They had suddenly disappeared. Again, we have another case from the 20s, a UFO, disc-shaped object near the ground or on the ground, and humanoids next to them. We're going to move on to Italy, another location, another area of high incidency of close encounters, entities, humanoids. And this one is from 1927. Investigated by Paolo Fiorino, Italian researcher. This is from Corbola, a place called Rovigo, Italy. One morning, while a 12-year-old girl, a lot of the witnesses are young, but maybe the older witnesses do not tell anybody. They pass on. But this 12-year-old girl was going to fetch drinking water at the River Po, which was nearby, when she saw a shiny and round object come from the sky. This object supposedly crashed into the water 7 meters from her. And after a couple of minutes, the witness noticed a big bubble in the water. A big bubble appeared in the water. And later, the object resurfaced and flew away, disappearing into the sky. The girl had the chance to observe the interior of the object, and she saw a little man inside who seemed to be seated, because he was only visible from the neck and above. The facial features were human-looking, and he was not wearing a helmet. The object, which emitted a hissing noise, had a diameter of about 2 to 3 meters. Again, this is a case of a UFO with the entity seen inside.
Albert.
Yeah.
This report reminds me of the one from Japan with the princess and the pearl that opened.
Back in the 1800s, yes. The fisherman, and she was inside the craft, and then she floated away, which is an amazing case. Very interesting case. Yeah. Okay, now we're going back to Australia again, 1927. A place called Orange in New South Wales. Again, this is an area where there's been a lot of cases reported there. Hundreds, if not thousands. The researcher that investigated the case, Rex Gilroy. He has published several books on these on the theme. Jawies also. He researches Jawi incidents or encounters. Because Jawies are like Bigfoots in Australia. This is in the Temple of Nim newsletter, November 2006. Okay, this is an adult, a Mr. Cecil McGann. He described it like a saucer at Fernvale, which is near the Orange. And that same year at Orange, another farmer saw a saucer-type craft which landed in a field in broad daylight. Out of it emerged three weird beings. The craft had an appearance of it looked like a Mexican sombrero, according to the witness, with a high pointed dome. As the men watched from some distance away, the three beings proceeded to collect soil samples from the ground with some kind of a digging implement, or some kind of implement they had, or tools. Then returned to the craft through a side door from which they had emerged. And shortly afterwards, the craft rose with a hissing sound and zoomed westwards high over the hills. The farmer later described the strange visitors or beings as having heart-shaped faces and long trunk-like noses. Maybe they were breathing apparatuses, who knows. He did not see their mouth due to the distance. They were clothed in dark, tight-fitting garments with high neck collars. The men thought they had hands and fingers similar to ours and were wearing very large boots. So it appears to have been a couple incidents reporting saucer-shaped objects, and this one actually landed, and again the occupants are seen collecting samples from the nearby area, from the ground. 1927. Okay, the next incident is kind of sad because the researcher from Quebec, Canada, Donald Sir, rest in peace, recently passed away 2 or 3 days ago. But he researched a lot of incidents in Quebec, and we used to exchange information. In this case, it occurred in a place called Stoke, Sherbrooke, Quebec, in Canada. September 1927, in the early morning. And the witness, a girl named Arsene Laventure, doesn't state how old she was, but she had decided to trek up a hill called Mount Stoke, and as a precaution, she had taken. It wasn't a girl; it was a boy. Arsene. I'm sorry. He had taken his hunting rifle with him. Near the summit of the hill, of the mountain, Laventure suddenly encounters 4 man-sized figures wearing all black clothing. The beings approached him and spoke to him in a language he couldn't understand. It wasn't English or German or French, which were spoken frequently at the time. At first, Laventure thought the strangers were looking for a local gold mine, which is said to have existed in the mountain in the distant past. Suddenly, Laventure apparently blacks out and later wakes up at the edge of the forest without his hunting rifle. He walked 4 hours at random without knowing where he was. I guess he was found far away from the location. He was finally found by friends, which he apparently does not recognize, and is taken home in a completely confused state. He was found confused and couldn't recognize his own friends. Not until the morning does his memory return, and he tells his family what had happened to him. Never again will he return to the mountain. Around the same time, many locals in the area had reported seeing strange lights up in the mountain, in the hills. Weird. So we must assume he was abducted also, and he was dropped off. Not even closer where he was taken, and they kept his rifle. Weird case. Rest in peace, Donald. Mon ami. Okay, the next case is from the English publication Northern UFO News, number 137, on page 10. It doesn't give a specific location, only the north coast of Scotland. That could be anywhere there. 1928 at night. Now, in England, Scotland, and United Kingdom, there's also a lot of reports from before 1947, hundreds. Okay, this the witness, Jack, was a young man at the time. He lived in the north coast of Scotland, like I mentioned, in a place and time where all the lightning came from gas lamps. A close friend had just died, and soon after, Jack woke up to see a glow by the door, something glowing by the door. At first, he thought the lamps had gone wrong. All the room was full of light suddenly. Then, suddenly, the room where he was vanished, and he was standing in another place. He found himself suddenly at another location. Excuse me. Jack thought he was dead. His dead friend was there, so he assumed that he was dead too. Standing between two men in white suits. These two men wore helmets with visors. The helmets with a visor, and they had slits where the eyes should be. Slits for the eyes. And according to Jack, his friend looked distressed and said, "I am not gone." The feeling during the experience was very odd. Time seemed to stretch out. The two strangers took Jack's friend away, and suddenly everything was back to normal. Jack found himself back at home. Now, this incident, that's what I'm thinking. Maybe Jack was somehow transported to another realm, his soul or his spirit, and his body was left on Earth, and he was taken by these entities. And I don't know, but this is a very weird case too. And Jack was able to somehow visit him before he was gone for good. Who were these entities? Extraterrestrials, or who knows? Interdimensionals. Like you said, did he really die? Did Jack's friends really die? Who knows? Doesn't seem that he died. It seemed that he went on. Okay, the next case, we move up to April 1928, near Yakima, Washington. Again, another area is a lot of incidents there. Encounters. This is from Jack's ballet book, Confrontations. A scientist's search for alien contact. April 1928, about 4 p.m. The witness, Harry Dillon, was driving along an unpaved country road. When he reached the top of a slight rise, he saw an object slowly coming into view. He described the object as resembling a metallic hexagon. Not a disc shape, but a hexagon with a dome on top. Olive drab in color. The witness could see rivets along a vertical section and a 2 by 3 foot window set in a metallic frame. In the window, he could see the upper torso of a man dressed in a dark blue uniform. The man had a dark complexion and was totally human-like. He looked intently in the direction of the witness car, and then the object rotated, flew across the road, and shot away at a terrific speed. Now, this is an interesting case because the object was not your normal disc shape or flying saucer, but it was shaped like a hexagon, green in color and with apparent rivets. What are we talking about here?
It's very unusual.
Very
You
unusual.
don't normally hear about hexagonal craft, and not with rivets.
Yeah, I'm saying an extraterrestrial craft with rivets traveling through space. Kind of strange, but it was it. Jacques Ballet investigated the case. He spoke to the witness. Interesting case. Here's another case on early November 1928, and we're going back to England, Bolton, Lancashire. Early November 1928 evening. This is from Norman Oliver in Quest UFO Magazine, Volume 11, Number 4. A young boy, Henry Thompson, was playing with a gang of friends, was running through a dark alley when he saw in the backyard of a house what he described as 3 strange figures peering into a lighted living room. These figures were looking inside the living room. The central figure was tallest. It turned and looked at the witness. He mumbled at the other 2, and they all turned. A wide black eyepiece divided down the center by a ribbed silver piece covered the face of the tall entity. All 3 appeared to be wearing inflatable rubber suits with dark boots. On their heads were transparent dome-like helmets. Tubes came from these and joined tanks that were on their backs. I guess they were wearing breathing apparatuses, I would imagine. They had pale heads shaped like light bulbs, slit like eyes, scarcely any nose. No, they couldn't see a nose, and no visible mouth. One made a strange noise, and all 3 began to move toward the boy. Needless to say, Henry Thompson ran away in terror.
I would also run away in terror.
And this is weird because these entities were looking inside the house or living room. Looking at what? I don't know. But it is strange. Okay, we move on to what appears to be another early abduction case. This one investigated by none other than Bud Hopkins. And this is from 1929, summer 1929, an afternoon, at a place near a place called Spring Valley in New York, state of New York. And this is 9-year-old Ellen Sutter. And according to Hopkins, that's a pseudonym, was playing outside her Spring Valley home, 30 miles north of Manhattan. Okay, when she saw a glint of light in the sky. Looking up, she saw a large metallic object shaped like a dirigible with many, many portholes and light coming from it. Sutter could barely believe what happened next. It was like she was rooted to the spot. All of a sudden, these peculiar things came out of it and seemed to be floating. She says that this is why she never told anybody, because it sounded like a dream to her. These people, as she called them, she doesn't know what they were, but they were like wearing diving suits with a head shape at the top and a much distorted, short-looking body. It was weird, according to her. There are about 3 or 4 short figures, each floating above and in front of Sutter, at about 30 feet in the air. All the animal sounds stopped, and time seemed to stand still. She's not sure how long the encounter lasted. Again, this is a case where the all sound stopped. She's like in a vacuum, no sound. At some point, the figures float her back into the craft through an opening that appeared. When she returned home, her mother scolded her for having been awake for so long. Following the experience, Sutter developed a phobia of being alone. She also suddenly became afraid of falling ill and having to visit a doctor. While at the same time, she wondered if she might have caught a disease from the strange visitors. She also began having nightmares of being chased by the figures. In the dreams, the figures were no longer floating and had approached her on the ground. Now, apparently, she had an episode of missing time when she came back home. She was gone longer than she was actually had thought. Okay, we have another case, the last one in the list here, from Italian researcher Maurizio Berga in his book When Saucers Came to Earth. Excuse me. This is from a place called Rocca Gloriosa in Salerno, Italy. Summer of 1929, around 2 p.m. A girl was working in a field when she looked up and saw a stationary ball of white light in the sky. This then descended vertically, stopping just a few centimeters above the ground. While descending, the ball greatly dimmed, creating a sort of opening in the center of the sphere. After 5 or 10 seconds, a female figure emerged from the opening, wearing a sumptuous black garment. She said it looked like those from the 19th century. It's female. Inside the ball, 2 or 3. She was able to see inside the ball 2 or 3 small beings that moved slowly and peered outside at her. She didn't describe the beings, but I guess they were different from the female. The female figure walked towards the witness without her feet touching the ground. I guess she floated above the ground. And thereafter she turned left and was lost from sight in some trees. The girl was frightened and made the sign of the cross. She then ran to call her father. When he arrived at the landing site, according to the report, he smelled a fragrance of roses. But the sphere and the lady and short humanoids were gone. This is one hard to categorize because you see a sphere, obviously, UFO type. A human-looking female that could be interpreted, especially back then, as a Virgin Mary apparition or Marian apparition. But then we have 2 or 3 small beings accompanying her in the craft. So
I guess that's why they call it high strangeness.
High strangeness, for sure.
Let's go to page 209, and the case is in northern Iraq from 1924.
Oh, the disappearance of the flyers. Okay.
Yeah.
I gotta find it. Can you start to read for me? Because I have to bring up the 19. Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry, 1 moment. I'll find it. This is an apparent, what I call permanent abduction in Iraq. Sumeria, Babylon. 1920s. Let me find it for you. I could have included more cases. I thought it was I had included enough. But let me find the. Here we go.
So this is on page 209
Okay, here we go.
from 1924.
Right, July
Iraq.
24th, 1924.
Yeah.
In the northern Iraqi desert, Mesopotamia, back then. And this has to deal with a couple of English Air Force pilots that were, I guess, they were flying in the area. Okay. Here we go there. Yeah, there was fighting between the Arabs and the British. And on that date, Flight Lieutenant W.T. Day and Pilot Officer D.R. Stewart took off in their single-engine plane for a routine four-hour-long reconnaissance flight over the area, because there was fighting and they had to go out there and check out the terrain. When the flyers failed to return, they didn't return, a search party was sent out for them. The next day, their plane was found in perfect condition. It hadn't crashed or hadn't been shot down or anything. Moreover, the gasoline was in the tank, and the engine turned over as soon as it was started. So it wasn't anything wrong with it. But they couldn't find Day or Stewart nowhere around, and they couldn't figure out where they landed in an area of barren desert in the middle of nowhere. Looking for clues, the search party noted boot marks where the officers had jumped out of the plane. Their footprints show that the men had left the plane and walked along side by side for about 120 feet. And then, while still standing next to each other, the men simply stopped. And according to the footprints they left behind, they vanished. A half a dozen of the desert tribesmen, soldiers, and armored trucks and search planes never turned up a trace of the pilots, who seemed to have walked off the surface of the earth. So their footprints appear to have reached to a certain location, and then they were gone. Where did they go? They were never found. I classify this case as a permanent abduction. Interesting case.
And Mr. M.H. has a question for you, Albert.
Okay.
What is your opinion on the miracle of Fatima in 1917?
Well, it's very weird because there were a lot of encounters of what they describe as a angel-type being or humanoid, and also what they call the Virgin Mary, which, according to the descriptions of the girls, it didn't really look like your typical Virgin Mary. It looked like a being wearing some kind of a suit, metallic, definitely female. But I think it was some kind of a visitation by either an extraterrestrials or interdimensionals that came maybe to influence. Back then, it was the end of the World War One, and there was a lot of communist threat from Russia and all that, and maybe they were there to influence, our history, like many of the incidents before or after that. But I think per se it wasn't really a Virgin Mary visitation, but it was some kind of entities that were there, and they were seen several times, and they. Also, there were reports of disco lights flying in the air and the sun flying around. So is one of the most interesting incidents of the 20th century. As far as UFO lore.
As I recall, with the Fatima case, there were 3 miracles and 3 secrets, and that the third secret had to do with UFOs.
And I think that was suppressed by the church. It was kept secret. They came out with a different, supposedly with a different secret. It wasn't anything related, but it was. What I heard was the secret was so weird that that they couldn't really say what it was, because it would have. Some people say it would have destroyed the Catholic Church. It would have changed history. It would. I don't know, but it was far-reaching. Do you have the incident? One of the first incidents occurred on May 17, 1913. It's Cuba de Iria, Fatima, and then there were at least I have 15 incidents of encounters. Cuba de Iria, August 17, and there was one case. They don't give a specific date, but it was from Miguel Pedrero, Spanish researcher. This is not one of the children involved in the encounter, but this is another resident, Carolina Carrera. She also reported encountering a strange entity which appeared to her according to her, inside a cone-shaped beam of light, which would gradually approach and retreat from her. So this entity was inside a cone of light, very UFO-like, okay? And they would approach and retreat from her. This cone of Urbino light seemed to emanate from a strange cloud, okay? A strange cloud, UFO, that will drift against the wind above the area. She told investigators years later that she had heard about the other rumors in which the young shepherds encounter other entities, including the Holy Virgin Mother. So this case here obviously is not the Holy Virgin Mother. It seems to me it's some kind of definitely UFO incident there. 1915, Fatima.
I was going to ask you, Albert, if you could give us a couple of cases from page 226, starting with the cab driver in Salem, New Jersey, 1927.
Salem? Okay, 1 second. Sorry, let me find that again. Sorry. That one has to do with the Jersey double encounter, yeah.
Yep.
Another interesting cryptid. So many cases, many reports about that. Tell you right now. Salem, New Jersey, 1927, at night. A cab driver suffered a flat tire while headed towards Salem in New Jersey. He just finished changing the tire when the car began to shake violently. The driver looked up to see a gigantic, what he described was a gigantic figure covered with hair pounding on the roof of the car. The driver left his jack and flat tire behind and jumped into the cab and sped away. He was under the impression that he had encountered the famed New Jersey Devil. Now, the description doesn't really match the New Jersey Devil, but it sounds to me like some kind of Bigfoot or hairy entity that came up.
Definitely. And can you continue with the case from New South Wales, Australia?
Fernvale? Okay. This is also in 1927, at night, Fernvale, New South Wales, Australia. And this occurred during a period of bizarre phenomena occurring isolated farm that included strange dancing aerial lights mysterious death of cows or cattle, dead pigs found with mysterious puncture marks. Another one disappeared. A 10-year-old boy was awakened by strange noises for about 3 nights in a row. One morning, several footprints were found leaving behind the front door of the leaving behind the front door to the back. Others saw a brightly lit object land in a valley behind an area of leaving behind an area of scorched grass. Older family members saw large, unfamiliar birds, what they call birds, or maybe flying humanoids, in the neighborhood. And one night, the family had gone to a social event at their neighbor's, and the oldest son remained behind when a strange man dressed in clothing resembling a white suit arrived at the neighbor's house. Everyone thought he was from one of the other visitors. Excuse me. He said nothing and only stayed for a short while. Back in the house, the oldest son was in darkness. He heard a noise in the house and yelled, "Who's there?" The boy got out of bed in time to see someone in a white suit disappearing into the darkness. The stranger in the white suit he was never seen or heard from again, and no one knew who he was. The investigator is Bill Chalker in his book, The Oz Files. Very weird, a lot of stuff going on at the same time. Flying
another
humanoids
one that might be a good one to go to is on page 227 from Chile, 1927.
Okay, this is this is a classic close encounter, long. In a place called Ventanas de Quintero in Loncura, Chile. January 20. We have an exact date for this one, 1927, 3 a.m. at night. This is from the researcher Liliana Nunez Orellana. I has corresponded with her today. Coincidentally, spoke to her a couple times. The lone witness was traveling through the area and he had just passed by the naval base at Quintero. He was in a Ford pickup truck and was keeping a route very close to the water, near the water edge. However, when high tide came in, he was stranded and was forced to wait it out at the highest point on the beach. As he rested half asleep on a small sand dune, he was suddenly startled by the presence of a strange figure standing in front of him. Terrified and curious at the same time, the witness stared fascinated at the figure. He described the figure as a little more than 1 meter in height. His body, including his head, were covered in an impenetrable opaque metallic mesh. Metallic twice. Where the face will have been, there was a sort of mask with a circular aperture which shone with a pale light, similar to the light emitted by a modern-day computer monitor. The witness then heard a very soft voice which told him, "Don't be afraid." They always say that, "Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of me. I won't hurt you. 20 meters from here, I have my ship, where my friend is waiting for me. We could take you with us, but we don't want to." They said that we could take you, but we don't want to. "We have known about the Earth for over 1 million years." This is what they told him. "We come from a planet which is close to Earth, but we live in its interior, inside the planet. And we possess scientific knowledge that humans are not capable of understanding yet. However, we're able to predict the future since it all depends on the workings of many different minds. We visit the earthly at all times. I mean, we visit the Earth at all times, and it's not difficult for us to do so. However, we cannot live on the Earth. The rays from the sun alone will kill us. So they were, I guess, since they lived underground, they couldn't stand the rays of the sun. Makes sense. The alien continued talking. We do not have eyes or ears, but we have very special knowledge and skills. Our nourishment is all based on nuclear energy. The same energy that your scientists are now recently researching, and it's based on the atom. What is called a brain for you, for us, is just special cells which are capable to connect to billions of other cells and archive memory which have been formed and collected throughout thousands of millions of years. Maybe the Akashic records, who knows? The brain is a mystery. They kept talking. We lack any emotions or passions. We are not really interested in studying anything about humans or knowing too much about your planet for various reasons. If we travel to the Earth, we do mostly at night and avoid contact with the sun. We are only 5,000 in number and only reproduce through chemical means and using special females of our species. The ship you see behind us uses atomic energy in combination with magnetic attraction to travel between the planets. At this point, terrified, the witness just stared at the entity, unable to move. Once he looked down to the alien's feet and noticed these square and shiny metallic, they were square and shiny metallic in appearance. The creature's arms were also very short. From his belt area, the creature took out a sort of a roll-out tape and placed it on the ground in front of the witness, and then walked back to his ship. Before entering the object, he turned around and said, "Don't try to follow us. We travel at light speed." Once the alien had entered the craft, a soft glow within the object started getting brighter and brighter. There was no sound. He was able to see that the craft was somehow cylinder-shaped and was emitting a bright blue-violet light from each end. In seconds, it disappeared from sight. Terrified, he ran to his truck and attempted to drive away, forgetting that it was high tide. At this point, the witness remembered the small tape-like device left on the sand by the creature, but it had been apparently washed away by the high tide. So a potential clue was washed away. That was left behind. Interesting case. A lot of information in that case. I wonder if these aliens, they say they lived underground on a planet. Maybe they're from Mars. Who knows?
Maybe they're from Earth. And another case that I would like you to tell us about is on page 200, I think.
Give me the name of the location.
Let me see here. I want to make sure I have the right one. There was something about H.P. Lovecraft.
Hold on. Okay, I see it. This is from Richford in Berkshire, England.
Yeah.
1925. Okay, this has to do with Lovecraft. You're right. according to the report from the website that's in the source there, a guy named researcher H.B. Albarelli Jr., the renowned horror and writer H.P. Lovecraft secretly, according to the information, traveled to Richford and Berkshire in England to investigate a strange phenomenon that was occurring in the two towns. Lovecraft had been visiting friends in southern Vermont when he first learned about odd sightings in Richford. According to the report, locals there had been terribly afraid of a beast they dubbed the awful, something awful. First spotted atop the Borite building at the corner of Main and River Street early one evening around dusk. The awful, according to records of old, was a winged creature that resembled a very large griffin-like creature with grayish wings that each spanned 10 feet. Talking about a winged humanoid. The creature possessed a serpent-like tail that equaled his wings' length, and huge claws that could easily grip a milk can's girth. 3 men, workers at the local sawmill, were walking across Main Street Bridge when they spotted the creature, perched on a building's rooftop, staring menacingly down at them. One of the men was so petrified he suffered a heart attack on the spot and had to be carried home. 4 weeks afterwards, his wife and children woke up in the middle of the night to hear him screaming in his sleep. 2 weeks later, the creature was seen flying about 50 feet above the Berkshire field near Lost Nation Road. The creature was said was clutching a small wailing infant in its gnarled claws. Wow. But most likely it was a small animal of some sort, a sheep perhaps, over the next several weeks. Numerous farmers around Richford and Berkshire reported seeing the awful flying over the fields. Farm wife Oella Hopkins was hanging the watch out to dry in her yard when she looked up to see what her dog was fiercely barking at. Following the dog's nervous glare, she saw the creature perched on her porch roof, gazing down at her. Terribly frightened, she ran into the house and hid under the bed, refusing to come out for hours. A year after the creature was first spotted, sightings dwindled to a few each month. After 3 years, they stopped completely. When H.P. Lovecraft returned to southern Vermont from Richford, he told friends that he was convinced that the Richford locals he had interviewed were not in the least mistaken about what they had witnessed. Lovecraft later wrote, "The creature or the awful became ample sustenance for my imagination, and over time the creature became the basis for many of my own fictional inventions." So he from that. Now I have to make a correction here. Richford, Berkshire, is not in England here. This is in Vermont. The two towns, Richford and Berkshire, in the U.S., not England, Vermont. There are two towns, one called Richford and the other one Berkshire. So if true, the story seems to indicate that Lovecraft used this incident to write some of his books, to get inspiration. There you go.
Yeah, this really reminds me of his story, The Whisperer in Darkness. And this is a movie version that was made by the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society. And I wonder if this case influenced his writing of this story. It's the only science fiction story he wrote. He mostly wrote cosmic horror. But in this story, sort of lobster-like creatures wash up after flash flooding in Vermont. And that's sort of where the story starts.
Well, yeah, this is in Vermont, definitely. And he says that he thinks that people there were actually seeing something, and he took inspiration from that to write books. I have to fix it in my account. For some reason I put England, but it's Vermont. I don't know. Sometimes there's so much information that my brain should scramble up.
And Mr. M.H. has a question.
Okay.
Were there any sightings of the Smiling Man / Indrid Cold humanoid before 1966?
It's hard to say. Maybe there were similar entities, but I can't recall right at the top of my head. Maybe they were incidents of entities resembling Indrid Cold, but exactly like it was reported by Derenberger in 1966 and others, no, not that I recall.
All right. And so this is the book that we are going to give away. And what we'll do is I would like for everyone in the chat to put a number down. Just pick a number between 1 and 6. And Albert, I would like you to pick a number between 1 and 6 and do your best to psychically send it to the people in the chat. So use your best psychic power. Send it to the people in the chat. You got your number. And so we have Don McDouglas with 3, Ivan Ivanovich with 2, Mr. M.H. with 4, Francis Bigby has 5, Whack Cackle, you'll have to pick another number. I guess it's number 1 probably.
Well, it's going to be a PDF version, so I can send.
Well, we want to make sure we get our winner.
Okay, I have the number. Want me to tell you the number?
Yes, what's your number?
It was 4.
Okay, 4. So Mr. M.H., if you will put your email address into the chat, then I will make sure that Albert gets it, or you can email your email address to me. At gil@sunflower.com. Congratulations, Mr. M.H.
Congratulations.
And he said he'll do that, so I'll get that email address to you, Albert.
Very good, very good.
Are there any other cases or anything about any of your books that you would like to discuss before we wrap up?
You're welcome. Like I said, I have a whole series of books, and I have cases from 1000 BC all the way up to 2021 right now. So these, whoever they are, the others, I call the others among us, they've been here with us forever. Extraterrestrial, interdimensional, I tend to think we have both. We have maybe from a interdimensional source, and we have a intergalactic or outer space source. Maybe there's a conflict, and we're stuck in the middle of the conflict. Age-old conflict.
And humanoids could come from anywhere, right?
Correct. And they're all kind of humanoids. I include Bigfoot type incidents. Not all of them. There's so many of them, but The ones that are more like high strangeness, like Bigfoot. Bigfoot that disappears in a flash. They're able to talk, or they have mental capacity, telepathic capacity. I mean, because in my opinion, Bigfoot is not really an animal; it's a entity, very smart entity, which is like a Wookiee, but it's not an animal. Well, any of those that think they could go out there and shoot it and hunt it, they're wrong. They're not shooting an animal. They're shooting a living being, intelligent.
And what can you tell us about your appearance on Into the Fringe for next month, when we'll be covering the 1930s, correct?
We're going to be covering the 1930s, which is full of even stranger accounts. I'm going to see if I have more cases ready, have some corrections made. But yeah, 1930s, and hopefully we'll be covering other years and specific type of cases. But yeah, we'll cover the 1930s for my next appearance, from 1930 to 1939.
Well, I know that we will be anticipating that, and that will be on the second Thursday of every month. Albert will join us here on Into the Fringe. Albert, I'd like to thank you for appearing today. It was a very interesting evening.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And hang out for a minute after the chat is over so we can talk.
Very good.
We will see everybody later. It's Cardinal Sin out.